Hello, look, I'm behind here. No, I'm not. How are we all doing? I hope this is working. There's every chance it's not working because Callum normally does all this sort of stuff and he's much better at it than I am. You'll see stuff on the side of the screen. Don't worry. I know it looks like there's infinite mics. That'll be explained in a second. How are we all doing? Can you hear me? Is the main thing. Can you hear me? Two thumbs up from the bogs. Hopefully that means you can hear me. Can someone let me know? Oh, great. Austin, thank you very much. Fantastic. Okay, so this stream is a test, basically. So if things go wrong, it's totally my fault because I'm an idiot. But anyway, so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to start at least writing a short horror story. And I was thinking of doing these live streams sort of semi-regularly where I work on certain projects and kind of do it live and people can jump in and chat to me while I'm doing it. And that's the kind of idea. We can maybe even bounce ideas off of each other as the process goes. And maybe you'll be interested in how someone puts together a horror story if you're not a writer. Maybe you'll be interested if you are a writer and you want to check out someone else's process. So that's what we're going to be doing here tonight. Let me just sort this out. Okay, that should... I also have the world's loudest keyboard. Callum in the chat will attest to this. And, excuse me. And so hopefully it's not so loud. I wanted it to be loud so that you hear the clickety clack of it. It's a mechanical keyboard. If you look closely, all the different mics are doing their own thing. Yes, they are. This is ghastly, Denny. It is indeed ghastly. Cairns Chaos. I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you, my friend? See if I've missed anyone. Okay, so yeah, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to write a story. Now, I have come into this blind. I don't have any ideas. I'm creatively bankrupt. But I don't have any set ideas about what the story is going to be tonight. So because of that, what I'm going to do is a little technique that I call the Bradbury technique. This is what Ray Bradbury used to do to come up with stories himself. And what he would do is he would use kind of few word association and kind of build a sort of idea around these sort of random words that come out. So he would start off with a kind of nonsense paragraph of words and then pick out words that have sort of appeared in that paragraph and then start to write the actual story. What's going to be really funny is if someone jumps into this while I'm doing the nonsense paragraph and they think something's happened to Mike. He's had a stroke because he's just typing nonsense. Raccoon King, how are you? Oh, hello from Oklahoma. Lovely. Okay, so let's start, shall we? Alright, so let's think of the first word that comes to mind. Now, bird. And I'll tell you why that came to mind, crow. Because I saw a dead bird the other day and it kind of affected me a little bit because it was a magpie and it had its companion just waiting around constantly for days. It was really sad. Anyway, so right, bird, crow, shovel, night. Hello, Hobbiton. Reverb. Let's go for it, Cal. Reverb. Reverb is in there. Anyone else want to throw random words in here? We'll try and do something with it. Anyone? Diaphanous. I'd have to look that up. No words I don't understand, everyone. Diaphanous. What does it mean, Boggs? What does it mean? I've just realised I don't have a way of looking this up. We'll leave that until Boggs tells us what it means. Okay, so bird, crow, shovel, night, rhubarb, path. There's a path next to where the bird was dead. What else jumps to mind? There's a train nearby. Conductor. I don't know why. Iron noise. Drill. There we go. Let's see. This is going to be hilarious. How are we going to make a story out of this? Right, drill. Okay, so I've already got a story idea from these words. Willow. Okay, put that in as well. Anyone else? Anyone else get any random words they want to add before we start writing? These words, for those that have just joined us, this is a technique that I call the Bradbury technique. What Ray Bradbury, one of my favourite short story writers, used to do is he would write out random words in a kind of free word association sort of way, and he would write out a paragraph or a few sentences of that, and a story would kind of come out of that in a way, and then he would start writing the story, not plotting out the whole thing. But here's the thing, it's a weird thing with me. Any other words down there? Pond. Batman. Oh dear. I should say, so Boggs says diaphanous means sufficiently thin or airy as to be translucent, of such fine composition as to be easily damaged or broken, delicate, transmitting light, permitting the passage of light. Right, I've liked that. That's good. Diaphanous it is. Pond. Oh, I just put pond rather than pond. Can everyone see what I'm typing okay on the screen? This program, incidentally, is called Writer. You can use it for free. It's my go-to application for getting down a first draft. You'll see that it's green text on a black background like the old word processors used to be in the 1980s. I think my love of that comes from the film Stand By Me, because that's what the writer's using when he's telling the story. But also I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm at that point in my life now where I look back to a lot of things, and retro things kind of come to me. I bought a complete collection of Goonies trading cards the other day. That's where I am. So okay, so let's see what else. Bruce Hanson from Australia. Hello Bruce, how you doing? Lovely. Mountain, Austin says. Right, we'll put that in. Shoehorn fault. Okay, my man. Alright. Okay, so I think, let's look at this now. Alright, so as I said, anyone that comes in now and sees this nonsense sentence, they'll think I've lost my mind. So Ray Bradbury would do this, and then a story idea would come to him. Funnily enough, what I found as I've got a little bit older is that I actually plot out my stories a lot more now. In fact, I've got a drive on Google that's got like 40 plots for short stories I haven't written yet. Now those plots don't always end up being the full story. Quite often what happens is you have an idea what the story's going to be, and it changes along the way. But what I used to do is I would have a kind of idea, a central idea, central scene, and then I would write from there. And the story would shape around it. And I like to change things up and try different methods every now and then. It's when I was a kid, I learned to play the piano and the guitar. I mean, I used to write songs on the piano and the guitar, still do. I found that the songs I wrote on the piano and the songs I wrote on the guitar, even though they're based on the exact same musical principles, the songs came out very different. And so I kind of feel that with writing techniques as well, that the technique itself lends itself to a different form of story. Hello, Bitty. How are you? Lovely to see you. We're just getting started. Bitty, we are adding in random words for a short story, something that should be included in the short story. So can you think of a word that you would like to add before I get started? Yeah, so this is Writer. It's free. You can use it. You need to have a browser to use it. However, it works. It works offline. It then updates when you get back online, which is really good. It backs everything up in the cloud. There's a pro version of it that you can pay for, which gives you a few other nifty features. But the basic one is absolutely brilliant. So easy to use. And what I really love about it, it's got typewriter noises. And I know I've got this extremely clickety-clacky keyboard, which is these... I'm trying to remember what switches are on this keyboard. I think it's blue MX switches. It's been that long since I've gone, but they're the loudest switches you can get because I love that tactile feedback. And I have a typewriter that I try to write a short story on. Once a year I try, but that's the hipster in me. But I love that tactile feedback, and I love the sound of a typewriter. So Writer here, the program I'm using, has typewriter sounds. I had to disable them for this though because it just muddied things quite a bit. Let's see. Hello, Slinky. Well, I'm really glad you're writing. That's excellent. We do look at other people's work, but really most of the time I just do my own stuff. But occasionally, I'll definitely take a look at stuff. What I would do is submit it to like creepypasta.com and see what sort of feedback you get. And that's where I kind of started off. And it was a good place to get feedback. No Sleep as well. The subreddit was a great place as well to get feedback. Blues are the clicky ones. Thank you very much, Archer. Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they? I just love... I'm really enjoying this. I don't know about you guys, but I love writing and I love talking about it, and I love all the paraphernalia of it. So maybe I'll do some stuff about that as we go on. Okay. Bosoms. that must be Martin Yates there, Talking Till Dawn. Incidentally, if you watch the channel for the Talking Till Dawn documentaries, we've noticed that a lot of people don't realise it has its own channel now. So there's new episodes up there. So please do look for that. Alright, let's get started. So let's read this sentence back. Bird, crow, shovel, night, rhubarb, thanks Callum, path, train, conductor, bridge, iron, noise, drill, willow, pond, Batman, diaphanous, mountain, shoehorn. See, that's coming up. Is it diaphanous? Should it be a P rather than a T? Was that a typo? Because it's I've got Grammarly here, which is quite handy sometimes. Although it corrects for American English, and obviously I'm from Scotland, so it's good when I'm doing freelance work. I do a lot of freelance writing because I can't quite support myself yet as a full-time fiction writer. Incidentally, patreon.com/Michael Whitehouse. It's in the description below. So I do a lot of freelance work, and things like Grammarly help speed up the process quite a bit when I'm writing in American English. Anyway, so let's go right. We'll start with our opening sentence. Hi, Jan. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, we love doing Talking Till Dawn, and we love doing all the other stuff, all the other Ghastly Tales stuff. Talking Till Dawn's still very much a Ghastly Tales thing. It's, but it's just that we thought that it'd be best for it to have its own channel. It's really an experiment. We kind of thought, well, we'll put it on its own channel and see if it does better than it would on the Ghastly Tales channel. And then if it doesn't, after a year or two, maybe we'll move it back. I don't know, but it seems to be doing okay over there, and yeah, definitely worth checking out. We have Martin does such a great job. I'm not just saying that because he's here, but he does all the editing, and he's really been carrying the torch with writing the scripts for the show as well at the moment, so he's been doing a tremendous job. Anyway, right, okay, opening. Right, first of all, I'm going to keep this in first person, okay? Like a classic creepypasta type of story, urban legend type of story. Writing in a first person, from a first person perspective, it's easier to get into than writing in third person. There's not as many moving parts. It's more restrictive in some ways. There's certain things you can't do in first person, but there's certain things you can. You can do introspective things that you can't really do in third person as well. And but there's an immediacy to writing in the first person, I think, which is really good. I only said Batman as a joke. If I knew you'd use all the words, I'd have said something serious. Don't worry, we're going to go with it. Okay, so let's start. Let me think. First sentence. So when I'm looking at these words, I'm thinking, all right, so I look at that part there, train conductor, and I think, well, that's a person. Is that the main character? And I'm thinking about a train that has broken down, and the passengers have to get out of the train. Yeah, I've got an idea. So let's start. I should say, this is absolutely shooting from the hip, and it's a first draft, so could be rubbish. There are going to be grammatical errors. There are going to be mistakes, and just remember that really when you write, you need one or two other drafts after that at least. Some people go through many drafts. I don't personally, which maybe some of you can tell. I maybe 2 or 3 drafts, and that's me. I'm done with the story. Leaking roof, Janet. Okay, we'll add that in. Okay, right. The first sign problem I do that as well. I miss out words sometimes. The first sign of a problem was a strange metallic grinding noise. We'll use contractions, I think. I've only been in the job for 2 months. Until that moment, I hadn't heard anything like it. Yeah, Martin says a train conductor called Drill Willow. Yeah, just get all the things. Yeah. Has a sister called Diaphanous. Okay, the first sign of a problem was a strange metallic grinding noise. I'd only been in the job for 2 months, but up until that moment, I hadn't heard anything like it. As the train carried along the track, it only got worse, and I could see worried looks on the faces of the passengers. Okay, so there's our first paragraph. The first sign of a problem was a strange metallic grinding noise. I'd only been in the job for 2 months, but up until that moment, I hadn't probably put a comma in there. Thanks Grammarly, I hadn't heard anything like it. As the train carried along the track, it only got worse, and I could see the worried looks on the faces of the passengers. I'm going to disable Grammarly for now because it gets a bit annoying. So in this first paragraph, we've established the setting, the location of where we are, in some sense that we're on a train. And although we haven't came right out and said that the main character's a train conductor, we're probably thinking in that sort of vein, aren't we? Okay. Oh, Hobbit, and I've read both the Halloween Tree and the October Country several times. I think the October Country is one of the greatest dark fantasy, I mean you could say horror short story collections of all time, and the Halloween Tree is A Christmas Carol but for Halloween, isn't it? That's what Bradbury was trying to do with it. Mr. Moundshroud and the gang. There's a really cool animated version of that no one ever shows on TV, and I managed to get a copy of it online years ago, and me and my wife watched it, and both really enjoyed it. The first sign of a problem was a strange metallic grinding noise. I'd only been in the job for 2 months, but up until that moment I hadn't heard anything like it. As the train carried along the track, it only got worse, and I could see the worried looks on the faces of the passengers. I smiled. Grey suit. You know, grey is one of those words, isn't it? I always get it wrong. Martin will correct me. He likes doing that. AY or EY. I think AY is the name, or may have that wrong. Right, okay, so classic Western cairns, and then the train goes off the bridge and Marty McFly travels back to 1985. Alright, so hello Spooky Dad. Which writing program do I use? This is Writer, and it's an in-browser program, word processor. It's really great. It's free to use, backs up on the cloud. If you go offline, it will still wait until you reconnect, and then it'll back up what you've done. You can use it on any device that uses a browser, and but I use that for my first draft, short stories at least, and then I go into a program called Scrivener, and it's one of the best programs for not just putting together later drafts of stories, but actually putting together novels and screenplays, and even doing self-publishing through it as well. It's great. Definitely recommend it. Leonard Nimoy played Mr. Moundshroud. That's right, I forgot that. Hobbit, and thanks very much for that. I smiled at a man in a grey suit, but he only scowled at me. It was the kind of look I quickly got used to. Not one I enjoyed. Again, as well, there's a lot of redundancy in this as well. Like that would, well, you know me, I like my descriptions, but that would get sort of filtered out in the process. If you'll see in the bottom corner there, there is. I'm actually. Should I move this camera slightly? Hold on. Yeah, move this slightly. Am I sort of out of frame a little bit? Oh. Right. Move slightly to the side. There we go. Okay. I smelled at a man in a grey suit, but he only scowled at me. It was the kind of look I'd quickly gotten used to, but not one I enjoyed. Flinky, do I only work on short stories? No, but I do have a love of short stories. I've written screenplays, radio dramas, or audio dramas, I should say. They've not actually been on radio, but I just call them radio dramas because I'm a big fan of that format. It's probably one of my favourite formats, actually. With Callum and Martin and Alan and some of the other boys at Ghastly Tales, we've made a bunch of short films, so we would really love to make a feature at some point. So like writing in that sort of vein as well. Written some poetry. I've written a lot of songs, but short stories are... I find short stories are a much easier fit for me. I think it's because they're just the right length to keep me interested. And I also think that a great mistake is made about short story writing, which is that people tend to think that it's easy to write a short story and hard to write a novel. And it can actually... I would think that a great short story writer could probably write a good novel. A great novelist might not be able to write a great short story. It's a different skill set. You can't be as tangential when you're making short stories. When you're making short stories. When you're writing a novel, you have the space to let things breathe, and that is really great. But for a short story, I think it really fits horror well because you're able to, the horror in real life has a shock aspect to it, and in a short story you can kind of get that a little bit. I don't like writing for shock, but I mean a sort of immediacy of affecting people through what you're writing. Yeah, Fall. They did make one. It was really good. I think it was 1992, something like that. Ray Bradbury actually does the narration in it. It's an animated film. It's a made for TV animated film. It's about an hour long, but if you can find a copy of it, well worth it. Jan asks, so I missed the opening to the live stream, but if you don't mind me asking, what direction is the story going? Paranormal, aliens, or more of a serial killer type deal? Just trying to get a grasp on the story. I don't know yet, Jan. That's the honest answer. Most people that have read followed my stories over the years know that I spent a long time dedicating myself to the ghost story genre. I think in the last 2 years I've sort of stepped outside of that more regularly, but who knows, it could be a ghost story. Raccoon King 888 asks, do I ever listen to music while I write, or does that distract? Also a huge fan of short stories. Stephen King's collection of short stories got me into horror. Night Shift is one of the best short story collections I've ever read. For Stephen King, that was great. Yeah, I do listen to music. I listen to ambient stuff, so I'll go on YouTube and it can't have words in it. I can't write if there are words in the songs, but I like listening to. Sometimes it's not just music. It's like there are these great YouTube channels that do ambient mixes, and so like if I'm writing a story, for example, I'm working on a short story right now called The Malefic Bird. And I'm hoping to sell it to the Creepy Podcast. That's who I've been writing it for. But I mean, they might not like it. But incidentally, check out the Creepy Podcast. Those people over there are great. But it's like a kind of classic urban legend creepypasta type deal. But it's set in a forest. So when I'm writing that, I go on YouTube. I find atmospheric ambient tracks that have been put together by people for a forest setting, and I listen to that. It could be a campfire crackling in the background, wind going through the canopy above, the occasional sound of a foot breaking a branch or a twig, that sort of thing, and that can help. What I find most of the time is that it's actually more just a way to get you to block out the world, and ambient stuff's good for that. Sometimes I just like listening to sounds of rain. I love rain. I'm a huge fan of it. I live in the right country. People always complain about the weather in Scotland. I love the weather in Scotland. I love those moody days that we get here. I love the fact that people don't think that we do, but we do get summers here. We get 4 seasons, and I really enjoy that. Yes, there's a lot of rain and wind. So that's what I sort of do. I listen to that sort of stuff. Don't say that, fault. Don't say that. A face behind me in the door. Imagine there was. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? That's the sort of stuff that goes through my head all the time. Alright, let's continue. Let's see what we've got. The first sign of a problem was a strange metallic grinding noise. I'd only been in the job for 2 months, but up until that moment, I hadn't heard anything like it. As the train carried along the track, it only got worse, and I could see the worried looks in the faces of the passengers. I smiled at a man in a grey suit, but he only scowled at me. It was the kind of look I'd quickly gotten used to, but not one I enjoyed. Maybe if I'd been one of the veteran conductors back at Central Station, it wouldn't have bothered me, but the public seemed far more condescending than I had thought possible. The train didn't stop abruptly. Instead, seemed to be hindered by the grinding noise. Passing tree landmark outside. The train slowed piece by piece, carriage by carriage, ending in a timid lurch that barely registered. Barely registered. Barely registered. So, barely registered. I could just say that barely registered, but barely. I have an idea of it barely registering with the bodies of the passengers, but it doesn't sound. It sounds a little bit ominous. But does that sound right? Ending in a timid lurch that barely registered. Classic White House, bringing unnecessarily elongating elongating a simple moment where a train stops. Yeah, Slinky, it's short stories can be difficult. I find that a lot of people when they're writing short stories, they don't have. You see, what really grinds my gears? There's something that I think one of the most often reiterated pieces of advice in creative writing classes, and even from very famous and far better writers than myself, is not, it doesn't work for me, this piece of advice. And this piece of advice is always given as focus on your characters, not on the plot. The plot's incidental. And I don't agree with that. I think what happens in your story is really what grabs the reader in a lot of ways. The characters are what make the story meaningful. So you could write a story that has really shallow characterization, but it has a great plot. You might have another first person story where you find out almost nothing about the narrator. and yet the narrator's in this situation that might be really exciting, really thrilling. Hopefully you hit both, you know. But I would say to anyone who gets stuck writing short stories, think about the plot. You know, everyone has a different process. Stephen King will say, don't plot, you know, just shoot from the hip. And that's great for some people, but for other people, write down. Just matter of factly, A to B to C to D, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. The end. Like literally write it like that. And then you have a framework, a blueprint for your story. And you can change that framework as you're writing, which often happens. You know, I had a case in point is a story that I had that I think's it was the first time that I wrote a story that I thought had depth to it, other than just being a kind of scary tale. There's nothing wrong with that, but it had a little bit more to it. And it was a story called Forgotten Valentine. It dreadfully needs a rewrite. Most of those stories back then, I just kind of wrote and then put up very quickly, but Forgotten Valentine had a depth to it, I felt. And I've had a lot of good feedback from people over the years saying that they felt pretty moved when they read it. Some people think it's overly sentimental, so it just depends what you're into. But Forgotten Valentine is interesting because I started writing. I had an idea for that story. So if you've not read that story, you've not heard it. It's a story about a guy who he has trouble sleeping. He's really reached a crossroads in his life where he has this sort of angst and anxiety, and what he does is he walks the streets of Edinburgh to alleviate the anxiety, and he doesn't really know why he's got this burning feeling of something pressing down on him, but he walks and he walks and he walks the cobbled streets of Edinburgh, and one day he finds himself standing at the gate of a cemetery. He doesn't know why, but he goes inside and he walks between the gravestones, and he feels the gravel under his feet, and he's struck by the peace and serenity of the place, this place where people are laid to rest forever. And when he's looking at the gravestones, he notices a gravestone that's overgrown, and when he goes over to it, he reads the name on the gravestone, and he realises that he knows the person that is buried there, and it was a young girl who he went to school with. And then you find out the story about what happened to him, and he had this kind of very short first love situation with a girl. I don't want to ruin the story, but obviously you know she's dead, but you find that out right at the start of the story. That story ended up having some haunted house elements and some frightening elements, but it also didn't start out like that. It started out as a story, essentially a straight up frightening ghost story, and it was about a guy who he goes to lay flowers at the grave of a loved one on Valentine's Day, and it's fiance. He sees a grave that has been neglected, and there are these withered flowers that have been sitting there for a long time on this grave. And he looks around him and he notices that most of the other graves are well kept. They're clearly visited by family, and this grave has been forgotten, and it's got a woman's name on the gravestone, and he feels really he feels lost at this point in his life. He feels abandoned and isolated, forgotten, losing the love of his life. And so he kind of takes pity on the person that's buried in this grave, and out of the roses that he leaves on his fiance's grave, he takes one and he puts it on this other grave. And what happens? He starts to hear footsteps following him. He starts to glance over his shoulder warily as he's leaving the graveyard. He hears the footsteps on the gravel but doesn't see anyone there. And then on the street as he's walking. And then at night when he's in bed, he hears the footsteps in the hallway outside his bedroom. And so this was a kind of classic story about I say classic, I don't mean that as in good, I mean sort of a pure story about a female spirit that latches onto this man and won't let go. You know, she noticed him when he put that flower down on her grave. And so that's what Forgotten Valentine started out as. It started out as that straight up frightening story about someone being terrorised by a spirit. Forgotten Valentine became a love story, something completely different. And so it started off with that kernel of that idea of a character walking into a graveyard, and then it just went somewhere completely different. And incidentally, that first story I was mentioning, what the original story was, I intend to, I had always thought it'd be interesting to write a short story collection that was alternate takes on stories I'd already written. Like, okay, that story went this way, well, how about if that story went this way, you know? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting really, really out of my element here. Oh, cheers, Austin. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a good one. Alright, so the train didn't stop abruptly. Incidentally, we've got 187 words. What time are we on? It's 20 to 11. Can we get 1,000 tonight? Can we get 1,000 words? That's what we're aiming for. And I'll try and do these live streams and we'll do maybe 1,000 words at a time until the story's finished. Okay. The train did 500 at a minimum. 500 words at a minimum. But let's shoot for 1,000 once we get to 500. The train didn't stop abruptly, but instead seemed to be hindered by the grinding noise. With each passing tree and landmark outside, the train slowed piece by piece, carriage by carriage, ending in a timid lurch that barely registered, other than to gently rock the bodies of the passengers momentarily. Again, there'll be loads of mistakes in this, things we can tidy up later. Don't worry, Miss Evie, we're still here. Right, Meat Juice, how you doing, mate? We're still here. Right. Yeah, Evie, I'm all about mechanical keyboards. I can listen to this. 'Cause I can write, 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 listen to this. 'Cause I can wr And this, one of the reasons I got this laptop is because it's got a good keyboard on it for a laptop. The travel of the keys, if you want something that really gives you tactile feedback with a keyboard, especially if you're writing for long periods, you want something that has a long travel. So that means that when you hit the key, it takes longer to press it down than on a sort of normal keyboard that's just uses what do they use, rubber instead of actual switches. They feel sort of mushy. These keys on this laptop feel pretty good, and you get a good amount of travel for a laptop. Keys. The best keyboard that I actually have had on a laptop, Callum. There's Callum. Hello, Callum. If a keyboard doesn't sound like an MG42, it can't write horror. You heard it here first. Listen, I've written horror on almost everything. Written it on terrible keyboards, but yeah, you want something that has that travel, and to me has that click. I think it's one thing. I remember watching, of all people, Tom Hanks is a huge well, careful what you say here, Mike. Tom Hanks is a huge collector of typewriters and a big letter writer, and he really loves the machines, and I love them too. And I know it's kind of hipsterish, like, to be like, well, I write on a typewriter, but I bought an old Remington travel typewriter and opened it up and sort of restored it. And although I very, very, very rarely use it, it's just a really nice thing to have. Reminds me of being a kid, because when I was a kid, I had a typewriter. My mum was a secretary, medical secretary, and there'd be typewriters in the house because of that. So I wrote on typewriters, electric typewriters, and we had them as well. And then all the computers that I had as a kid, Atari ST, I think I must have written on a ZX Spectrum, but definitely wrote on an Atari ST keyboard. But anyway, Tom Hanks had this phrase for why the sound and the feel of a typewriter is important. And I think he called it I'm paraphrasing, but he called it something like the percussive sound of creativity being brought into the world, or something like that. I know that sounds incredibly pretentious, but I think he's right. You know, like I say, I've been a musician my entire life as well as a writer, and actually playing something that there's something to that, as opposed to programming the instruments and using MIDI. You know, it's there's something about physically playing it, and I think that's the case for like clickety clackety keyboards. The only thing with a keyboard like this, though, right, is if you listen to this, it's loud, and you know, I've got a 3-year-old in the house. She's sleeping right now, but hopefully this doesn't wake her up. And there's times where I'm up late working on stuff, and my wife's in the room, and I can't use this if she's got work in the morning. I can't be sitting going, you know. So I would use the keyboard on my laptop. I would do that. Transcriptionist, excellent, Evie. That sounds interesting. I've done a little bit of transcribing before. I was terrible at it. It's a real skill to be able to do that. Yeah, check out Tom Hanks's videos. There's some videos on YouTube about it. I think there's even one where he shows his collection, and it's pretty incredible. And there's one where he shows you how to change the reels on a typewriter and stuff like that. I love people talking about things that they're passionate about. I could listen to anyone talking about anything that they're passionate about, except murder. But you know, I could listen to that even if it's not something I'm interested in. But if you're talking about what you write your stories on and stuff like that, then I'm a sucker for all that sort of stuff, you know. And this is the thing why I'm so excited about doing these live streams where I'm writing and talking about writing, and because I don't know what sort of audience there's going to be for this, but I mean, like, we've got, well, we I was just about to say we've got 26 people in the chat. It just went down to 23 as soon as I said that, but you know, that's quite high numbers for us on the channel for a live stream. So hopefully people do enjoy this. It's like a cozy thing, and you know, maybe you'll want to write alongside us, or you know, bounce ideas off each other. Yeah, Cairns, it does print instantly on a typewriter, but no, the ink ribbon that you have on some typewriters has a corrective um, part of the ribbon, and you can basically push the head of the typewriter back and erase what you've done. Or what some people would do is they would just put an X over what the mistake is. Another thing that you can do is you can just buy whitener, Tipp-Ex it out, and there you go. But I get what you mean. You know, I get what you mean. Like, once it's down, then it's down. You know. Martin says, Mike, we have a show where you listen to me talking passionately about murders all the time. that's very true. But we tried to handle that in a sensitive way, Martin. Come on now. It's more of a, you know, curiosity about the darker side of life, but and mysteries are still out there. Come on now. Come on. You're a lovely guy. I know you're not sitting there going, ho, 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 ho. Did I tell you about this knife? Okay, so I knew the driver. His name was Harry Fennell. I'd seen other conductors and drivers give him a wide berth back at Central Station over the previous few weeks. Evie says, question, I've had traumatic nightmares since childhood and many people have told me to write stories about them. How would one go about stepping into this world? Well, Evie, see if you look at our videos. There's a video called, what's it called? I've got this new series called Night Terrors, which I'm really enjoying doing, and it's kind of stripped back audio format of storytelling, just pure storytelling, which I think is really eerie. But the first episode of that is called The Fiend, and it's a recollection of a nightmare that I used to have, because I used to have night terrors when I was a kid. So I also, you know, I've suffered from terrible migraines all my life, and when I get them, sometimes I get really lucid visions. But they are almost like that sometimes when I'm in my worst states. And you kind of have strange experiences in that sort of state of mind, and sometimes stories sort of are plucked out of the ether in that moment. And I've even had moments where I've had dreams where the story's been almost kind of complete, you know. So I would absolutely say that you should mind that sort of stuff. It's also incredibly therapeutic if you write about your fears, about the bad things that you've experienced. You don't need to, I mean, especially if people you know are going to read your stories and you don't want them to know you're talking specifically about this situation or this person, or you can sort of dress it up in a different way and come at it from a different, you know. When I was talking about a story, Forgotten Valentine, earlier on, which is about a man looking back to a relationship he had when he was a boy with another girl. Well, he didn't really have a relationship, he had a friendship with her, but he very much loved her, and she died when she was young, really under traumatic circumstances. And there's stuff that happens in that story that's actually about the death of a friend of mine. You know, like a friend of mine committed suicide, and I was there when it happened, and tried to resuscitate him, and it was a really profoundly terrible thing that happened, and had a deep, deep impact on me for many, many years. That story was like partly my way of climbing out of that utter post-traumatic stress-filled era in my life. So I would say absolutely, like, whatever it is, like, write about it. Write about it. It's such great therapy to write about these things. And you can either write about them and you can journal about them, or you can write fiction about them. And I mean, quite often I find that there's stuff that comes into my writing that I realise, like, I know no one else knows, but I know, I'm like, I know what that's about. That's about something that happened to me that I don't really like to talk about. You know, like, but I know that's what that, even just like a wee throwaway thing that's came into, sorry, I crap myself there. I just saw there's a glass door on the other side there and the light's off, but there's reflection of me, and I just felt like that in my hand, and I just saw something go shh past. Sorry, excuse me. Just looking at the chat. Hobbiton says you wrote a horror comic to get over trauma. That's excellent. Definitely. I mean, one of the most famous stories of all time in horror, well, in the ghost story genre, which is, you know, one of my favourite genres, is The Signal Man. It was written by Charles Dickens. And it's, funnily enough, whoa, here we are. We're writing a story that's set on a train. It's set in a similar circumstance. And really what Charles Dickens was doing in that story is he was working through, whether he knew it or not, a real life horrific train accident that he was in where a lot of people died, and he saw unbelievable carnage that day. So, you know, and he produced, if you told me that The Signal Man is the greatest short ghost story ever written, I wouldn't. Like, I think there's other stories that are as good as it probably, but if you said that's the one you're going to pick, fair enough. It's that good, you know. Sometimes the experiences that we have lend to, I think, a more profound and meaningful form of art, you know. Yeah, raccoon, sleep paralysis, yeah, that will definitely do that too. You can have all sorts of weird experiences. Right, let's get us up to 500 at least. We're on 275 words. I knew the driver. His name was Harry Fennell. I'd seen other conductors and drivers give him a wide berth back at Central Station over the previous few weeks. He was the kind of guy who said either too much or too little. Conversation with him was like getting blood out of a stone when he wasn't. Would. If the name of a train that moves other trains? Is it a shunter? Is it a shunter? I think it's a shunter. I'm pretty sure it's a shunter. Sure, we'll need to wait for a while until an engineer gets here. Minutes seems too little. 45 minutes be with them back. That's another thing as well that I don't like when I'm writing. It's I've got a little bit of OCD for it, and I have it a lot when I'm reading other people's writing. It doesn't mean that it's badly written stuff. It's just a sort of weird tick that I've got, which is that word repetition can really, like, if there are two words that are too close to each other in the one paragraph, or that, like I put there, I sighed when I heard this. Just another 45 minutes and we would have been back in Glasgow and I would have been finished for the weekend. And then I was going to put, okay, I sighed, but that just wouldn't sound right because I've just said I sighed a second ago and it just wouldn't have. That's understandable. Sometimes I go really OTT with that sort of thing, and I'll use. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, this guy sounds like he uses a thesaurus when he writes," but that's really down to the fact that I don't like words being used too often together, and so I'll use alternative words for meaning the same thing. I think it's because I wrote. Sometimes I think it's because I was a musician. I nearly said a magician. Watch this, everyone. And because I was a musician, things have a kind of melody to them and a rhythm to them, and when two words are used too close to each other that are the same, especially if they're like verbs or adjectives, then there's something off about that for me. Anyway, yeah, I think what we'll do is how long, can someone tell me how long we've been streaming for? Anyone know? How long have we been streaming for? It's... Hello, Sir Pigginsworth. When you start writing a story, do you have it planned out mostly, or do you do it on the fly? I was talking about this earlier on. I used to have like a vague idea sometimes, but sometimes I would just go straight in and write and not have any idea where the story was going to go. I've noticed that as I get older, I tend to plot my stuff out. But it's rare that it's like a completely fully formed plot. It's just like something that has a beginning, middle and end. And that's like a framework that I then work through, and then through the writing process. Sometimes the framework's still there by the end and it's, oh, okay, I can see those three plot points were still there. Sometimes they've completely changed. But it gives you this sort of confidence to write when you've got an outline. But just don't use it. Don't use it as like something that's set in stone. Just use it as like, guide signposts that if you get lost off the track and you need to get back on, then a little plot can really help you with that. I would say as well, I don't know, I mean, when I say like as I get older, you know, I used to write short stories in one sitting, maybe two at the most, and then maybe like read through it once. I was terrible for that, and then just put it online. It was kind of feverish for me. I've carried that into my work. You know, I've done ghostwriting for quite a lot of clients, and I've written novels for people and short stories for people, and but they, you know, my name doesn't go on them, and I know I write I'm an outlier. I write a ridiculous number of words a day. You know, sometimes you know, I would have like 10,000. I think the most I ever wrote in a day was 15,000 words. But to be fair, I didn't want to write the next day after that. But I've done 10,000 word days for client stuff, and some of it being fiction. And I think that that's not a reasonable sort of goal for even me, and I can do it, but you know, that kind of wears you down writing that amount. So like some people might watch this and I'm like, oh, let's get to 1,000 words. 1,000 words is like the minimum I write of my own stuff a day. But you shouldn't feel that like everyone's different, and you should just work. You find your process, find what works for you. And I know writers who arguably are better than me, and they write 100 words in a sitting, and they pour over it and over it and over it. That's just not part of my process. But when you read creative writing guides and things like that, with like what a process should be and what your approach to writing should be, the second someone tells you this is the way to do it, there's loads of ways to write. You just need to find what works for you, and I sometimes find it exciting changing your process every now and then just to see what it's like. Have I ever taken writing classes, or are you self-taught? No, I've never taken a writing class. I did my first year. I studied psychology at university, and my first year I did do some English literature, but there was no creative writing component for that. Yeah, I've kind of always written. Like, I think about that sometimes. It's like when I was a wee boy, I used to take, you know, I'm sure a lot of people did this, but you know, you take like blank pieces of A4 paper, you take a few of them and you fold them in the middle, and then maybe you get a stapler and you staple them so it's like they've got a spine, and then quite often I would draw the name of the book, and then a picture, and then the back I'd write the blurb and draw another picture, and then the book would be filled with like, you know, a picture and then just like a little paragraph about what's happening in it. And I was doing that from like a really young age. I mean, a lot of the time I didn't finish them. That's what I will say. Completing stories, as much as I've written since I was really, really young, completing stories, like, that honestly didn't hit me until my late 20s. Like, I got fed up of having things that were unfinished, and after that I just ended up being like, I don't finish everything that I start now. You know, sometimes stories grow cold, but I finish the majority of the stuff that I start, for good and for bad. But in some stories I go away from. I mean, I've got a story called The Tenement at the moment. It will absolutely get finished because I know what happens at the end of the story. And it's a short story. I've been writing it for 3 years. You know. But then another story I'll write in a day or 2 days. You know, it just depends. It's a strange process. Really strange. But yeah, I'm not against taking writing classes at all. I think you can get a sense of community sitting talking about writing with other writers. That's loads of fun, I'm sure. You know, I have a little writing group on Facebook. It's a private group. There's only like 7 or 8 of us. Some other writers I know online, and you know, we don't post it very often, but when we do, we can all kind of have little chats about like what we're doing, and pick ideas off of each other about like kind of like, you know, not mostly with how to write, actually just with like career steps, you know, like everybody's sort of trying to break out, you know, and everyone's doing it in different ways. I'm kind of doing it through podcasts and in a lot of ways. Most of them are doing it. One of them's doing it through podcasts, but most of the other ones are doing it in different ways. Self-published. Some are just trying to go the traditional route of getting an agent and then getting a novel published, going down that route. My pleasure, Janet. My pleasure. I've really enjoyed doing this, but come hell or high water, I'm getting to 500 words. I decided when I heard this, just another 45 minutes, we would have been back in Glasgow and I would have been finished for the weekend. Okay, I said, that's, there you go. Stephen King says, don't use adverbs, you know, in your dialogue. Well, I just did. Okay, I said mournfully. Right, something just beeped on my phone. What was that? Ah, nonsense. Spam. See the amount of spam I'm getting at the moment? I've changed my mobile number because it's been horrendous. I've been getting that weird scam thing where like the number that phones me is like almost exactly the same as my number. You know, like just a few digits are changed, but like it's almost the same number. It's weird. Oh, Janet, don't worry about that. I'm sure you're not. I'm 40, Janet. I'm already creaking. Don't worry about it. I turned 40 last year. Terrifying. No, it's not really, actually, to be honest. I think I had my midlife, not my midlife crisis, I suppose, but well, if I'm 40 and I live to 80, then, oh, holy shit, Michael, yeah, this is your midlife. Just let me take that in for a second, everyone. I've just realised that. So, I had my wobble about my age when I was about 35. I think I had a wobble. I did have a wobble recently. I tell a lie. Once I'm really worried because Callum's posted something and it says message retracted, and he's been doing this to me in our private chats to wind me up, and I don't know if he's winding me up. I forget what I was saying. See, age. I had a wobble recently with my age. I did have a wobble recently with my age. I got put on I got my medication for my migraines changed last year, and one of the side effects is that it can in some instances make you lose hair, and so I've got a wee bald spot going on up here, everyone. But it is what it is. Lose my hair, don't have crippling headaches. The hair's got to go. Hopefully it won't all go, but you never know. I'll shave it. Callum, stop doing that, mate. I can't. I have no idea what you're saying. Okay. 379 words. Let's get to 500 and then decide if I'm going to continue on tonight or not. Okay, I said mournfully. Let me know if you hear anything. As soon as we... No, not as soon as we... See, like, that's an example of, like, I have these thoughts sometimes when I'm writing. That's an example of a paragraph there that just maybe doesn't make sense to other people, but the way I think it does. And that's like, I think I've got, and in no way am I trying to say that I'm special in any way, but I think I've got a strange brain a little bit. I've actually had investigations done into my brain, and it does seem to operate slightly differently than a lot of people's. And sometimes I think, long story short, it's to do with epilepsy. I'm not epileptic, but epilepsy is connected to severe migraines, and one of the problems I have with my migraines is it affects my use of language at different times, and it's kind of, sometimes I wonder if, like, I read a paragraph back and I'll think, what is this? Does this make sense to other people? So I'll read this back. As soon as the conversation ended and I hung up the receiver, the speaker system crackled into life. It was an old train, and as Harry spoke to the passengers through dusty wiring that weaved through the carriages, unseen like veins, his voice sounded as weathered as the machinery through yeah, can't speak properly. His voice sounded as weathered as the machinery through which it was passing. Maybe it does make sense. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Do I listen to... Oh, Original Stevens here. How you doing, mate? Lovely to see you. Do I listen to Horror Babbles work? I have. Excellent YouTube channel. Definitely check it out. They do some tremendous readings and adaptations of classic material. That's a channel that I would that I would definitely like to collaborate with. I think I think we've got similar audiences. There's probably a lot of overlap, but I would definitely like to do that. Is that why you told me to stop flashing that light into your eyes? It all makes sense. Yes, Callum. Please don't flash eyes into me. Please don't flash light into my eyes. Yeah, Hobbit, and I'd love to collaborate with. And I'm really lucky. I mean, I don't think I've really interacted with Horror Babble so much, but I'm really lucky through my writing across the years. I've gotten to know a lot of sort of bigger horror creators, and the weird thing is I've never really pushed to be promoted by them, really. Probably to my detriment. It kind of feels a bit icky, but I have talked about doing collaborations with people, and there are some bigger YouTubers that I've like given stories directly to and said, this one's for you, make of it what you will. Okay. Alright, 429 words. Let's get to 500 and see how we feel. We're at 2 pages. It sounded as weathered as the machinery through which it was passing. So, like, we're nearly 500 words in, and we've established a good few things. Why is my friend asking me if I'm up for the cinema? Callum, you'd get that message as well. Hi, Mandy. How are we? Yeah, Mr. Creepypasta, he's not read anything of mine for a long time, but Spike's really, any interaction I've had with him has always been really nice. He's always seemed like a really good person. But I think I know he's talked to me before and he said, look, if you've got something, send it to me. But I don't know, like a few years ago I kind of fell away from posting my stories onto other websites, and I stopped posting on No Sleep. I stopped sending stuff to creepypasta.com. I stopped submitting stories to the No Sleep podcast, which is a place where I got, a good chunk of my readers from. And I've been very lucky to have been part of that podcast. But I don't know why. I mean, in the last year, I've started submitting stuff to some other podcasts and bits here and there. I don't know why I sort of pulled back from doing that. It probably hindered me. But I kind of just started posting my own stuff, and you kind of want to sort of build your own thing. Yeah, Sir Pigginsworth. It is difficult when you've got you've got an idea of what you're doing, and then I think, see, this is what I would say, that the biggest stumbling block for any writer is second guessing themselves. I've got a friend who, not so much maybe with writing, but he's a very creative guy and he's extremely talented. And I think he would be brilliant at doing things, but he has this block, which is that he'll start making something and then be like, nah, this is a bit rubbish, isn't it? Is this rubbish? Is this rubbish, everyone? Is this rubbish? This is a bit rubbish, isn't it? This is rubbish. Nah, let's just leave it. And I think a lot of writers have that. A lot of people who are really talented, they sort of second guess themselves about whether it's any good. And that's the beauty of the first draft. Just get it done. Don't worry about whether it's good or not. Just get it done. Do it and then go back to it and you can make it better. Chances are that if you write something and you think it's rubbish and you go away from it and you come back to it and read it, it was better than you thought. Incidentally, sometimes you can sorry, I'm hearing my wife moving about upstairs. I hope it's my wife. Otherwise we're in trouble, everyone. You can definitely overthink things. So just go for it, and don't worry about whether you think your ideas are coming together or not. Just get it down on paper, and then you can either go straight into a redraft, or some people like to go and write something else and then come back and do a redraft, so they've got some distance. There's a sweet spot, I think. You don't want to give yourself too much distance. You give yourself too much distance, and I think the story goes cold. I mean, I just said there on stream just a little while ago that I'm working on a story. One of the stories that I've got that's unfinished is a story that I've chipped away at for 3 years. And it definitely goes cold. And I have to go back and read through it and do little things to it, rewrites, and then that gets me back into it. And then I'm like, okay, well, and then I write another part of it. But really, I think your best... I mean, Ray Bradbury used to, when we started tonight talking about the Ray Bradbury technique for coming up with stories, he said that write a short story a week. And that's a lot to put on yourself, and I'm not saying that you really have to do that. There is this idea, you look at a lot of writing blogs and people will be like, I write 3,000 words a day. This is my daily schedule. This is the way to do it. Great, fantastic, but not everyone's going to write 3,000 words a day. Not everyone, people have families, people have other commitments. But then even people that don't have those commitments, it can take them a long time to write something, and that's fine too. Again, find your own process. But Ray Bradbury did write a story a week, and he had this idea that he would write a short story in 2 days, and then the other 3 days were for picking away at it and redrafting it, then send it away somewhere to try and sell it. Which probably explains why he only wrote a couple of novels, because he was just always writing short stories, which nothing wrong with that at all. But that's what he did. The plumbing. Can you hear the plumbing? Beautiful. No, Callum, I know I've got a new number, but I've still got my own phone. I'm in the twilight period. I've got two phones, so I've still got the phone with my my full on number, and I will give you my new number. Yeah, Stephen. A lot of people found my stuff through No Sleep Podcast, but the funny thing is, I think a lot of people think that that's like the main place that I got known online, and the truth is, it was creepypasta.com was where, I'm very, very grateful for what happened in the No Sleep Podcast, and I love all the people involved over there. They're great people, especially David, who runs the podcast. So such a kind soul, and an inspiration really, because he sets a tone for the people that he works with, and it's an open, empathetic tone. There's no stress, but as much as I'm really, really grateful, and I've definitely found a lot of readers and listeners through the No Sleep Podcast, the biggest place that I got found was creepypasta.com. That was back when creepypasta was hugely popular. It was just reaching its peak, and I came into the community maybe what would that have been, 2011, something like that. Would it have been as late as that? Maybe round about then. And I was so lucky because the person who owned creepypasta.com, they had a system which was they put up 2 stories a day. That meant on a website that was getting tens of thousands of people visiting every few hours, that you were getting 12 hours for your story to be there. 12 hours. And the owner of that website was so... I was so lucky. I just got in there at the right time. I got in there at the right time because I wasn't writing creepypastas. I've only written a couple of creepypastas. A lot of the stories that I've written, people are like, oh, that's a creepypasta. No, it's, people think of it that way because they were on creepypasta websites. But they're horror stories. They're short stories. They're literary stories, really. And I don't mean that in a snobbish way. I just mean that that's what those stories are. And I really admire creepypasta stories. I think the great creepypasta stories are as good as anything, but they get a very specific style. And but I was really lucky because the creepypasta.com owner, I think, took to my stuff because my stuff was more like straight up short stories, and not a lot of people were doing that. I think myself, CK Walker, maybe around about the same time, we were kind of doing that. There was a couple of us that started doing that at the same time. And one week on creepypasta.com, it may even have been in October, when that's the biggest time because people are wanting to read scary stories before Halloween, I get an email from the owner. I just sent in a bunch of stories, and the owner said, do you know what, everything I've read the last couple of weeks to try and put stuff up on the website, I've not really enjoyed, but I've enjoyed every single one of these stories. I'm going to give you the whole week. And I was given the whole week. I was given an entire week, 7 days, on one of the most popular horror websites online. And that was huge for me. Huge. And I think that was what then got me. And I was just really lucky that people responded to the stories. And at one point I had like 5 stories in the top 10 or something like that. And because they had a rating system. Doesn't mean you're better than anyone, and I'm not saying this from an egotistical point of view. I'm just saying I was lucky that happened for me, because then more people found that, and there was like blowback from it. I actually got people like deliberately downvoting stuff on other websites, finding me, sending horrible messages to me, people leaving messages. Someone was like, "You're a fucking blocker." You're blocking other people's stories because you're like, you got too many stories over this space of time. And when I think about that, you're a blocker. Like that. That was quite funny. And then I had a good relationship with creepypasta.com when it was at its height, and I was really lucky that way. And I was so lucky that David from the No Sleep Podcast, not long after that happened, had read a couple of my stories on the No Sleep subreddit, and said, this was near the beginning of the No Sleep podcast, and he said, I want to do a bonus episode with 3 of your stories, just your stories, 3 of them. I'll narrate 2 of them, you can narrate 1. And so he read Bedtime and Tunnel 72F, which was just called Tunnels at the time, but I changed it because there's loads of stories called that. And I read Forgotten Valentine on that. It's the only time that I've done any voice acting on the show. And that was huge for me. And after that, God, I'm prattling on here, but after that, I got, into writing for the show, and then I was lucky enough that I approached David with some radio plays that I was going to do of a series of my own, and he said, this is the sort of stuff we want to do on the No Sleep podcast, because they'd already done a radio play, but it was like a play from the 1940s that was actually one from that era, but they wanted to do some original ones, and I was just good luck that I had emailed them at that point, and we both spoke about it, and it was like, okay, and then I ended up writing for the live tours, so it kind of spiraled like that. I was so lucky. Anyway, sorry, I'm prattling on, we're not even at 500 words yet, 429. Slinky says, what's been helping me write is breaking down an issue, problem that is either the most immediate or most crucial. I get a block when there's a lot of simultaneous issues. Laugh out loud. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Like, streamline things. And sometimes as well, if you are at a point in your story and you've really genuinely tried and you can't find any way forward, then dial it back a little bit and go a different way. Oh, that's a shame, Stephen. I'd love to have seen you there. It was actually the live show in Glasgow for the No Sleep podcast tour was one of the greatest nights of my life. I didn't expect to get, I was there with my family, and I had not that long before then my dad had passed away, and it was a hard time for all of us, and I was there with my mum and my mum's friend and a couple of my friends, and I just expected them to go through, they performed several plays throughout the night, but when they got to mine, David said some really lovely words and he got me to stand up and everyone was applauding and all that, and for my mum, for that in front of my mum was just, I was buzzing. It was great, and it was a real lift for all of us at that time. Rick, I do want to know, why are you late? Why are you late, Rick? What happened? Please tell us all. Rick, I'm trying to get to 500 words. That's what we're trying to get to. Because what time is it? It's 11:30. My word. His voice sounded as weathered as the machinery through. Right, now let's go back to our original paragraph that we chose all these random words that we're building the short story out of. So we've got the train conductor, iron noise. We've kind of get that with the sound of the train breaking down. Right, okay. It's a horror story, Rick. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yes, Evie, who was it that said, was it Hobbiton said Batman, was it? I can't remember who. Someone said Batman, but don't you worry, I already know how Batman's going to feature in this story. I'll just tell you, someone's going to be reading a Batman comic. There you go. Done and done. Don't worry, he's not going to turn up, save the day. Well, that'd be cool. When it comes to fan fiction, we've thought about that before, like doing some fan fiction stuff. Callum used to talk about want to do some fan fiction short films on the channel, and I had the idea of doing some fan fiction audio stuff. Like I had an idea for a standalone audio episode set in the Aliens universe, and I also had one in the Ghostbusters universe. You know, and I did actually think about doing them. You know, I thought maybe it'd be a good way to bring in traffic to the channel. But incidentally, if anyone's listening to this and you're not subscribed to Ghastly Tales, please do hit that subscribe button. I hate saying that. Hit that subscribe button, everybody, and hit the notification bell and all that sort of stuff, because it really does help trying to build the channel. But do you know what? I'm so lucky that any of you are here. I could be sitting here on my own with no one here, you know, and it's so lovely to have people. Like, I can't tell you, like I know someone who, I know a couple of people who are really downbeat because, you know, maybe they're not getting the audience that they used to have, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, like, if you have anybody listening or watching or reading, or, you know, you are so lucky to have anyone doing that. And if I never get to a point where I can, you know, when I can do this full time, it's okay. I'm going to try and go for it because it's what I really want to do in my life. But if I can't become a horror creator for full time, then I'm just so blessed to have people like you all here talking to me, and, you know, it really, like, I can't tell you how much it means to me. Actually, it's anyway. I have something in my eye, but yeah, it's a really great thing. I'm very lucky. Let's see from the pastures about the situation. Or Batman is a Deus Ex Machina. Yeah, just turns up at the end. Boom, crucifix. Tss, end of the vampire. I'm not saying there's going to be vampires in this. Yeah, Cairns' new Ghostbusters film, Afterlife. I wish they just called it Ghostbusters 3, but apparently all the original cast are back in some capacity, but, well, apart from Harold Ramis, obviously, but, yeah, like, I'm looking forward to that, to see what it's like, you know, but at the end of the day, I don't know. Ghostbusters is such a great film, and do you know what? Ghostbusters 2's a lot better. I love Ghostbusters 2. It's not a great movie like Ghostbusters. It's not like Ghostbusters, to me, is one of the best films ever made. Ghostbusters 2 is like, it's a solid sequel, and it's enjoyable, and you get to spend more time with those characters, and it has Vigo the Carpathian. That's a great villain. I think the thing that hurts Ghostbusters 2 the most is that they did what a lot of franchises do. They tried to, like, reboot everything, so it's like, oh, the Ghostbusters are out of business, so let's see them go back into business again. Like, you're just retreading the first story then. And the music as well. I think the music in Ghostbusters is a little bit too bombastic. If you listen to the original Ghostbusters, the score's amazing, but it's not too heroically bombastic, whereas there's parts in Ghostbusters 2 where it is, and I think that takes away. I ate those films like custard when I was a kid. Yeah, the real Ghostbusters is tremendous as well, the cartoon. Evie, tumbleweeds and a great view of the stars sounds wonderful. That sounds wonderful, and I'm really glad that I love to hear that when people, and I don't mean from an ego point of view, just it makes it feel worthwhile if people enjoy the stories or the videos or the podcasts, you know. It makes it feel worthwhile. I would do it anyway, but I'd maybe be bitter. Nobody's listening to me. Callum. No, they didn't do kids' parties in the first film. They're totally different. Do you know Hobbit and Extreme Ghostbusters? I haven't done it as much as I'm a huge real Ghostbusters fan, but I've heard it's good, so I'll definitely need to check that out. Saving the day, Jackie boy comes in with a belter of a comment. Saving the day. Yeah, that's a great song. Yeah, like I know Ray Parker Jr. got. I think it was for the guitar riff, wasn't it? Bum 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 la da 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 bum 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 la da da da. It's really similar. There's a really funny Key and Peele sketch about Ray Parker Jr. and all the other films that he's sang songs for that like never saw the light of day, and he's put together a compilation album of all of them, and it's really funny. It's got a pretty obscure reference in it, but it's like the songs are really literal, you know. Apt pupil. There's a kid and a Nazi down there. Once he informed the passengers about this. That's something as well that for a long time I didn't do when I was writing. I wouldn't use that sort of phrase. The train had 3 carriages and each had less than 10 passengers in each. Each had less than 10 passengers in each. That's great writing, Michael. That's chef's kiss. That's beautiful. The train had 3 carriages. Yeah. Delete that. The train had 3 carriages and less than 10 passengers in each, spread out from each other like they had the plague. That phrase, like, you know, or that word, like, I would sort of avoid that a lot of the time in my writing, but I've given into it recently. Oh, Jackie, yeah, Knife Point Horror, Soren Narnia. That deserves a real chef's kiss. Like, as a horror fan, it's very rare that you find a real a real like writer or a new piece of horror that really grabs you and you're just excited by it. You're always looking for it, and you will find them every now and then. But if you spend a lot of time watching horror movies, if you spend a lot of time reading horror fiction, if you spend a lot of time listening to horror audio, then it does the great examples of those formats become fewer and fewer for you. But you'll find them. It's like when you do, it's so great. And Soren Narnia, who's a writer who writes and narrates for Knife Point Horror, tremendous stuff. Really great. Yeah, I agree, Jackie. Like, I think when I first started doing Ghastly Tales, I don't know if the videos are still public, but you'll see that I used to do just stripped back narrations, no music, no anything, just. And I think I lost the confidence in being able to do that in a lot of ways. And with my Night Terrors series, really in some ways getting back to doing that type of narration and that type of voice work and writing has come from listening to Knife Point Horror, because the stories are so unsettling, and unlike almost every other horror podcast, there's no rich score. There are very few, if any, special sound effects. It's just Soren narrating the story that he's read, but in a very natural way. And so I make no bones about it that I've been seriously heavily influenced by him recently, and it's sparked something in me, I think, to make those sorts of stories. And that's, if you look at those Night Terrors episodes I've been putting up, that's what they are. Exactly, it's not overly produced, Jackie. Exactly, but look, there's space for everything. It's not a criticism of the podcast. That, look, I do Fear Noir. Fear Noir is a joy to work on, although it takes me a couple of months to get an episode out, and I know that drives some people mad, but that's just the way of things at the moment for the amount of time that I have. And those episodes are, have a score, and they have special effects everywhere. It's like a, full on production, but it suits that. It works. I wouldn't do it without that. But what Soren's doing, and what I'm trying to do with Night Terrors, that works really, really well when you don't have sorry guys, I'm getting tired. When you don't have that safety net of the score and the special effects, the sound effects, it becomes just a tremendous exercise in pure storytelling. The more I thought about it, I guess as Cam's suggesting, the more I thought about it, it was a long train, perhaps the longest train I'd ever seen, or perhaps the longest train I'd seen that day. Who could say? Well, I could, but I won't yet. Yeah. And each spread out from each other like they had the plague. So this is an example of sometimes you'll want to research things and be absolutely accurate about the locations that you're writing about. Now, I've already mentioned something a couple of times, which is Central Station. Central Station, Glasgow Central Station, but I don't think I mentioned Glasgow. But Central Station could be anywhere. It's a kind of generic term. So I'm just talking about an old train line that's not very busy called the Eastfield line. But that doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. So you just, it's fine to just make things up completely. Other times you want to guess, like someone said to me what time is it here, Evie? It's 1:45. 1:45. Yeah, Stephen, it's that's one of the best things about Soren. I like, he doesn't have many interviews, but if you go onto the Lovecraft Easing podcast, there's 2 like 3-hour episodes of that where he's on it, and you can watch the video of it, and they're kind of having a group chat. It's great, really great. That's a great podcast. I really enjoy that one. But that's how I found it, is because they had Soren Narnia on it, and he talks about that on those podcasts. He talks about how he doesn't like promoting things, but he says he'd sell out like anyone else, but he just doesn't like. It just makes him feel icky. I think he doesn't want to promote, or But then it's easy to say that, I think, as well in some instance, because It's very popular, Knife Point Horror, as a podcast. And like, it would be very easy for me to say, for example, oh, it doesn't matter if people read your stories. It doesn't matter if people listen to what you're doing. It'd be very easy for me to say that. It is kind of true deep down, because you're still writing and creating something that's been brought into the universe brand new, that didn't exist before, and that's a wonderful thing, and it can be therapeutic for you. And who knows who'll come across it in years down the line, you know. You could be discovered a lot, you know, after you've popped your clogs, you know. You don't know. That being said, so you should continue no matter what creating. But it is very easy to say, I don't like promoting this, I don't like doing that, when it's popular, because you feel, you know, it's like someone who's in a solid relationship saying to someone else who's just got out of a bad relationship, or they're on their own and they really want to be in a relationship, and just saying like, oh, you know, you don't need a relationship, you know, you don't need it, you know, you just be strong in yourself. It's very easy to say that to someone when you're in a settled relationship. You know, if you all of a sudden have the rug pulled out from underneath you, you know, that advice quickly crumbles. Haunted TV? Don't know that one, Rick. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do. Did they do? Is it like? Do they do like reenactments of like this, of people's allegedly real encounters with the paranormal? Absolutely, Evie. That's absolutely correct. And when you're talking about talking the talk and walking the walk as well, like, see, when it comes to writing advice, it's one thing I always say to people is, I don't see, I don't believe that, and I'm going to use a really pretentious word here, I don't believe artists know what they're doing. I don't think they really, really, truly know what they're creating most of the time. They might think they know and talk about that, and they might talk about, here's advice, here's how to create the best sculpture, or the best book, or the best film, or the best stage play, whatever it is. But they don't really know what they were doing, because most of it comes from the subconscious, comes from all the experiences you've had, you know, all the stories that you've consumed, absorbed, and then they come out. Stephen King calls them the boys in the basement. You know, it's like there's something just outside of your awareness that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Your awareness comes in when you make conscious decisions about, maybe that's not very good, I should change that. Oh, we've got a problem here, well, let's think about this, you know. But most of the time when you're in that creative zone, when you're in a real creative zone, especially when you're writing, I think when you get into that flow state, they call it in psychology, and it applies in sports as well, you're not thinking about what you're doing, really. So when you get people doing creative writing courses, and I'm not, again, go and do them, I think people will get a lot out of them. But in the end, and I'm saying this as someone who has a half-finished book called How to Write Horror. You know, I will release that book at some point to try and help people. But at the same time, I know that part of what I do, I don't really understand. There's a magic to it. That's a great way of putting it, Evie. Flows from you like your inner colours coming out. Yeah, definitely, Jackie. That's what I was saying. Stephen King, The Boys in the Basement. That's what, you know. On Writing's a great book. You know, if anyone's wanting to get a book about writing, and then it's kind of half biography, half writing advice. But it's probably the best. I mean, I haven't read many books specifically about writing. What I do like, what I really love, I love reading biographies. I don't do it very often actually, but I love, like, I've got a Rod Serling biography that I really like, because Rod Serling's one of my biggest influences, and I love reading about other writers and the struggles that they had, because, you know, like anyone, I have my own struggles, and being like, I'm a full-time writer, you know, it's like, it's not, I don't just do this in my spare time, you know, it's my I work as a freelancer, but a lot of it's fiction, and you know, there's a treacherous career, you know. I've especially when you got a family, you know, it can be really hard, and you can sometimes be flying and doing really well, and other times, you know, where's my next pay coming from, you know, like that. So it's a difficult life. So I like to read about other writers and the trials and tribulations they faced, and their biographies, and their approach, and the things that affected them and made them want to write. And sometimes you'll find something that's really inspiring, and it's just enough to keep you going. We need 2 words. We've got 2 words, 498 words, everyone, and then we've got 500 words. It was going to be a long wait for any help. Being a rookie conductor, I wasn't given one of the busier lines. It was an old route known as the Eastfield Line. I don't like this. I don't like this that I've just done here. This is too reminiscent of the Signalman. Too reminiscent of the Signalman. I'm going to delete that a little bit. Cut through. Sporadically interrupted. Okay, 518 words, and it's nearly midnight now. I tend to write a lot faster than that normally, so but I'm really loving talking to everyone, and I think it's really nice having company doing this, and us all watching this story take shape. So I think what I'll do is 4 minutes to midnight. Midnight's as good a time to end the stream as any, everyone. And I just want to thank everybody. Original Stephen, the end. Aye, that's good. Let me just look through the comments. Yeah, Evie, I think that's a really great approach to your daughter. That's why in some ways it is more important what you get as a creator out of what you're making than what other people think about it. As much as I've said, you know, it's still amazing to have people enjoying your stuff. But really, it's the art of creation, or the act of creation rather, making things, that is what sustains you. I used to describe it like, for me, you know, I've been making just things non-stop for my entire life. Since I was about 3 years old, I learned to play the piano, and after that, just whether it's, and some things I'm better at than others, you know. I like to draw, but I'm terrible at it. Music, making films, writing, but writing's my main go-to thing. But when you're doing these, when you're, I think it's really important. I know a lot of people that love writing or want to become a writer, and I think they're more in love with the idea of writing than writing itself. It's like it becomes the, you know, I try to say to people, look, try and enjoy the process if you can. Because in the end, if your work doesn't go anywhere, and if it doesn't, or it doesn't end up being very good, you still got something out of that, because you had the process and the joy of making it, you know. No fault. I'm not going to type the end. It's got absolutely no. There's no story yet, really. We just have a train that's broken down on the line and introduced our main character. We don't know their name. Maybe we never will. It's just the conductor, and we know that they're on a quiet line in a part of the country. You know, that little bit of isolation, which always plays well into horror. But I really hope you guys have enjoyed this tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was a bit nervous about doing this tonight, because I've I've streamed once on Twitch by myself, and I found that nerve-wracking. But I've never twitched on YouTube. So something your granddad says. I never twitched on YouTube. All these Twitchers out there. I've never streamed on YouTube and by myself. Normally have Callum, who's been here all this time as well, that's lovely. Yeah, like, thank you so much to all of you for being here. It's been a real pleasure. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to keep this video up as well. I'm not going to like private the live stream. This is just something that's going to be a running thing on the channel every now and then. So the next one, what I'll do at the start of it, I'll do a recap, read through what we've got so far, and we'll do the next 500 words, maybe 1,000 the next one. Maybe I'll stop prattling on as much as I have. But thank you so much to each and every one of you. If you want to support the channel, please subscribe, share our stuff, and if you want some like even more behind the scenes stuff and access to some other things that I do, please do consider joining my Patreon. It's in the description below, and you can get like little exclusive pieces of stories, and you get early access to things. And I'm not really selling it, am I? But it really helps to support what I do. So anyway, but it's we got like 50 people over there, 49 people over there, and I'm really blessed to have had that support over there, and we have a lot of fun over on the Patreon. So please do check it out, patreon.com/Michael Whitehouse, and that's the e-begging done with. So thank you very much. You're all absolutely splendid. And now I'm going to exit out of this, and imagine I couldn't exit out of this. Right. Oh, there we go. Infinite mics again. Oh, a court magician's just turned up. And Rich, lovely to see you. David Bailey, lovely to see you, mate. Thanks very much, everyone. You're all splendid, and I hope you're all doing well. Callum, how do I stop this? I just hit stop streaming, don't I? And then that's it. Oh no, I'll do the outro. Bye everyone. Take care.